What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, Eugene and I are going to talk about, let me bring up the email that I sent out. It's based off one of the emails that I did, which if you guys are a part of the email list, the Chew Crew list, you can join that. Go to Chewjitsu.net. But it's about the fact that your jiu-jitsu coaches aren't there to spoon feed you. And we get into some specific ideas on how to take deliberate action towards your jiu-jitsu game and your training to improve. So I think this one will be useful to you. Hope you guys enjoy it. As always, big thanks to our sponsor, Charlotte's Web. Real quick story, a fun one. So I always tell people, like, if you're curious about like CBD stuff, just try it out. Try it out for a month. See what happens. Just try it out. Well, I end up giving, the other day I was giving, or about a little over a month ago, I gave a tincture to one of the black belts in the gym. So there's a guy that trains with us. He's from one of the other Sean Hammond's affiliates, the team that I'm on. And he's been training with us for several months. And about a month or so ago, I gave him a tincture to try this out, see how it works. Just see if you notice a difference. And I told him to take it like 30 minutes or maybe an hour before bed. And so he was taking the CBD plus magnesium and everything else before bed. And he said, man, he goes, I could tell the difference with the CBD. It's like just how I felt, and the overall effects from it. So again, he came up to me the other day. He was like, hey, Chewy, how much was that vial that you like? How many milligrams was that vial that you gave me? I was asking him how it went. He's like, dude, I felt great. I really liked it. So again, I always like seeing people try it. Now there have been times where people have tried it. He's like, I didn't really notice much, which it happens. And so again, everybody's bodies are very different. So I always just tell people, if you decide to kind of get into the whole CBD thing, get one thing for a month and just see how it works and give it a whirl and then kind of go from there.
Yeah.
And if you guys want to try some top shelf CBD and you want to save a little money doing it, you can head over to charlottesweb.com, use a promo code Jiu-Jitsu. You'll save 15% on the order.
Yes. And
help support the podcast. And again, you'll save a little bit of money and you can try out a month of something. Again, just use it on whatever product you want to, but try it out for a month. I'm a big fan of the sleep gummies. The tinctures are really good. I gave my friend who's a black belt, I gave him one of the tinctures. So it's like the little oil droppers. And so they all work really well. And again, you can give them a try and see how it is. And again, if it works for a month and you're experiencing a lot of benefits from it that I talk about and other people have, well then good. You've got something new that you can add into the arsenal for recovery. But again, if for some reason, if you decide that you don't like it, it's not feeling too good, well then you don't need it anymore. Mm-hmm. Try it out. Again, I've done the same thing. I'm a consummate experimenter with my body.
Yeah.
I try new supplements, I try new diets, I try everything. Like I'm going to figure out what works for me because I want to try different stuff. I feel like it's the way most people should be. Experiment with yourself, try things out. Also, big thanks to his Epic Roll, Matt, my buddy over at Epic Roll, BJJ.com. You can check his stuff out. He has recently come out with
is it the Grey Gi?
Well,
pre-order.
He has a Grey Gi pre-order. I'm gonna have to get with him because I want some shorts. He's got these slick looking. He's got joggers too. I'm looking on his website. He's got even underwear. I know he had underwear.
So he's coming out with these Velcro-less shorts.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, yeah.
I think that's what I'm looking at right now. So
they're green. They're
green. Okay. Well, these are the ones I'm looking at right now. I like the look of these. So I've got the black ones, but these got gray and blue. I might try to get some of those gray ones from him.
All right.
But he's got some cool MMA shorts, fight shorts, grappling shorts, whatever you want to call them. It's fun fact. If you guys didn't know this, I was talking to one of the students earlier. Rash guards and shorts come originally from surfing. So basically, this was when I back in the day I used to play online video games. And I had a buddy that I played, one of the games that I played back when I was a youngster was called Ultima Online. It was like one of the very first MMOs, right? And so we were playing this game, and I played with a couple Brazilians. One was Fernando, the other one was Daniel, and then they had a brother, Carlos. And Daniel and Fernando were the ones I played with, and they both did jiu-jitsu. It was so funny, though. Fernando was like a 6-year white belt because he said
6-year white belt.
Yep. So he would, in the summertime down there, he would surf. And then in the wintertime, when there was no surf, he would, however it works, whenever there was no surfing, he would just go to jiu-jitsu. And he was just talking about how, they wore his rash guards and stuff. And the early rash guards and board shorts back in the day were essentially like, they were like the rash guards were turtlenecks, just like they are for for surfing and stuff.
Yeah.
And the old board shorts were incredibly tight. I remember the original shorts that started coming out for MMA and stuff. They weren't very movable. Mm-hmm. Which now if you get into it, like if you like look at any of Matt's stuff, or if you ever wear any of it, I mean, all the stuff that comes out now is very movable, flexible, very comfortable. Like the rash guards are very comfortable.
Yeah.
The other ones were not. I feel like I was being choked the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's very different. So, but again, if you want to get yourself some cool jiu-jitsu gear, which with again what I think some cool designs, check it out. EpicRollBJJ.com. He's got everything from belts, hoodies to gis, rash guards, everything else, and you can give it a check out. And then again, promo code is Chewjitsu, and you'll save 15% on the order. And then, guys, if you want to, I used to always say for 23 cents a day. If you guys have been listening to me for long enough, it used to be 23 cents a day, but we have an upgraded tier if you guys want to do that too. But with the Patreon, it's the way that you can support the podcast directly. If you head over to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, you can get your hands on, literally, get those mangled jiu-jitsu fingers of yours on literally like hundreds and hundreds of pieces of content. Everything from podcast extras to warm-up videos and stretching videos to full-length seminars that I've done. I mean, it's all there. And along with that, I'm just getting back to the swing of things with it because I had to take a week off because of just everything getting back from the competition stuff. But I do a live stream, like a live Zoom meeting. So if you want to come hang out with me on a Sunday, sometimes we'll do it on different days, but most of the time it's on a Sunday. If you want to hang out with me on a Sunday, Brady Bunch style on the Zoom, you can do that, right? So it's basically, it's kind of, actually I was telling Jess, it's actually kind of fun. It's fun to sit down with because it's literally like, you're getting together with maybe 5 to 10 people.
Yeah.
Sometimes more, it's like there's been like 15 sometimes. It's very small. The groups are small, which I like. And so it's cool because like they come in, and then people can ask questions, and you can just talk with them directly and just like hash things out and be very useful to it, and I like that it's a direct connection to people. Because again, a lot of times for some of you guys, I don't train with you. I've never met you, but you have this relationship with me where you've seen me do videos and everything else. And so it's really neat to see people on the other end and say, hey, Chewy, like, it's nice to meet you finally, whatever. And by the way, I had a question. We can just talk directly.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool thing about it. And so if you want to jump in on one of those, if you go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, there's like the second tier up. It's still what I believe to be well underpriced. But if you want to check that out, you can go to the second tier, and you can get all the podcast extras and all the content. Plus, you can get the live calls with me on Sundays and that whole thing. And that is that. So, guys, with all that stuff out of the way, let's jump into the podcast. All right, guys. So I got a question from one of the viewers, actually one of the email subscribers that I have on my email list, part of the Chew Crew. I've dubbed them.
Chew Crew?
The Chew Crew, yeah.
All right.
I've dubbed my email subscribers as the Chew Crew. He sent in the message. He says, does the, quote, just show up and train, end quote, attitude only take you so far in jiu-jitsu? Is there a point where people need to make a deliberate effort to bring their game together? i.e. blue belt or purple belt or something like that. And so it's just to kind of roll right into that question, before we get into like everything else, let's talk about two things. First, for me, I believe it was Walt Disney that said this, and this was like a writer downer for me. Walt Disney, I believe it was, he said people only really, and I'm paraphrasing of course, but he said people only really learn what they only really learn something after they've discovered it, right? And I think if most of us think about this, right, when you think about things you learn the hard way, those are the things you've really learned. And even think about techniques, right? You learn a technique from your coach. Your coach teaches you, right? But when you first learn that technique, it's a very superfluous knowledge, right? It's like you don't really know it. Like you know it exists. But when you use the technique and you make mistakes with it and eventually you hit it during a roll, then you kind of know it, right? Because, I just made it work under real circumstances. And it's even like if you were to like read a book on some subject, you might kind of know about it a little bit, but you don't really know it. But if you like read through that and then digested it enough to teach to other people, you'll really know that information if you do that.
Sure.
Because, it's just a different level because you're playing around with that information on a deeper level. So I think that for the most part, people only really truly learn what they discover to be true. And the discover typically is associated with practice. Now, the other thing is that I don't believe coaches are there to spoon feed you. I think that a lot of times when people look at their coaches, they like want them to like, hey coach, what do I need to fix my game? It's like, well, you have to take kind of an approach to that because your coach can't be there with you all the time. I see coaches as guides, right? The coach is there to, as I was saying before, I only think that people can make just like the information that they learn it only really comes into fruition when they make the discoveries on their own. Mm-hmm. And with that, I think that the coaches are guides that simply help facilitate a discovery of your own with good training practices, and they kind of light a path to follow, right? So for instance, when my coach started teaching me Kimuras, he never came up to me and says, you know what, Chewy, the Kimura is going to be one of your best submissions that you're going to use from now until you're a black belt. Now, it is that submission. It's probably my most consistently used submission across the board from white belt to black belt, right? Other ones have come and gone, but that one and the rear naked choke have been like the consistent ones. But the Kimura has been one of my best submissions. Now, my coach never came to me and said, you know what, Chewy, that's going to be your move. That's going to be the one you're going to be good with. But what he did was he showed me a path and said, hey, Chewy, let me show you this technique, and I'm going to show you some stuff. And I used to make this mistake and whatever else. And he lit a path for me to follow. Now, along the way, I was going down his path, and I was like, you know what? I want to go over down this way. Now, there's not a path there. I got to find it my own, but I diverted off. And so I typically think that that's the way that it works. Now, what happened with this Kimura situation was when I started playing with the Kimura, it initially felt very good early on. It was kind of a bright spot in my game. So, as you're a white belt, a lot of times in the beginning, you're just surviving all the time. But eventually you get to this point where you're in a bright spot where you're like, oh, something worked. Well, the Kimura was one of the first things that kind of worked for me. So it was like being hungry, and then all of a sudden you get a whiff of food, and you're going to follow that whiff, right? You're going to follow it. And so that's exactly what happened. I got a whiff of something that was working in my game. I followed it. I ordered a bunch of instructionals and stuff like that. And I remember like with one of the DVD sets that came in, I remember it had a side control disc, and I wore that side control disc out. I watched the Kimura stuff over and over and over and over again. And it worked so well that I remember I came into the gym, a couple months later or whatever, and was using techniques that he had never shown. And I remember he looked at me and my buddy training. He's like, you've been watching the DVDs, haven't you? Shit-eating girl. I was like, yep, I've been watching them, right? Yeah. I've been doing them. And so again, I think that and this again, I was an early young white belt at this point. And so I think for everyone, from the get-go, you should be involved with a deliberate practice, with some deliberate effort in your game. You may not know everything, right? And so again, you're always going to be open to the information that your coach gives you and the advice they give you. But I think from the very beginning, you should be doing something intentionally to impact your game. This could be watching instructionals. This could be watching matches. This could be watching whatever. I mean, for the way I used to do it, we didn't have YouTube back then for all you youngins. This is a time before YouTube. Imagine that, right? I would have to buy discs of like matches. I'd have to buy tournaments. I remember I bought like a bunch of the ADCC box sets. Oh yeah. I had a bunch of VHS tapes. I found like a website that had like VHS matches. So like, VHS tapes of tournaments and fights. I'd watch fights and see people use jiu-jitsu in fights.
Sure.
And then I would watch instructionals, and I'd watch this stuff over and over again. I'd watch my own matches And so again, I was taking a very deliberate game. And again, even though I didn't necessarily know everything, watching the matches and watching all this stuff, it definitely increased my jiu-jitsu IQ overall. Like when I came into jiu-jitsu, I was watching videos and stuff before I even started training. When I first started doing jiu-jitsu, the very first day, I knew mount. I knew what mount was. I wasn't good at them, but I knew what the general idea was. Right. I knew you pass guard, you get to side control, you go to mount, you go to back mount. I knew all these basic positions, and so again, I think that for anyone, understand your coach is not there to spoon feed you. They're not there to go, here you go, like take this, whatever. Your job. First off, let's go this. The showing up part, the just show up attitude, that's the framework that's everything's built upon, right? So for instance, around us in this room, there's walls, right? The walls are held by frames, right? They're held together on top of a frame. The framework, that's the show up mentality, the show up attitude, because if you don't show up, nothing else happens. It's just nothing. That has to be the constant, right? Showing up. This is with anything. The deeper, like deliberate effort, that's what you should be doing from the get-go. And again, you learn from wherever you can, but you cannot expect your coaches to spoon feed you. And I don't mean this to be mean to anyone. Not to say like, oh, Chew, you're being mean about it, like, whatever. It's not that. I'm just being real with you, right? Like the students that come in that I see that grow the best are the ones that are taking some deliberate effort into their game, and they don't simply like come into the gym and clock out when they leave. Right. And again, maybe you don't want to study jiu-jitsu when you're at home. Maybe you don't want to. I don't know. But for me, I never have done anything to be mediocre. And in some of my classes, I'll ask this question. I'm like, hey guys, how many of you guys came here, show of hands, how many of you guys came here to be mediocre at something? Not a single person raises their hand. Well, if you don't want to be mediocre, you got to put in a little extra effort. And I think that just putting some idea into your game, some sort of focus into your training, because again, you're playing essentially a game, and you're in create a character mode all the time. Every day you train, you're putting a couple experience points towards a particular area of your game. And so along with the idea of like watching instructionals and all that other stuff, one of the most important things, and this is something I'll preach on this till the day I stop training, which is hopefully never, probably would be the day that I die, right, is to focus on a particular area for a while. I talk about this over and over and over again, but if you want to have creativity in your game too, and you really want to like really sharpen another area, you got to go there. You got to increase those areas of your game where again, you start off with a bright spot, some area of your game that's feeling pretty good. Hang on to that for a while and go there for a bit, and just put some effort into that particular area for a while and see what comes of it. But focusing on some area for a while and being very deliberate with that focus.
So one thing I was thinking about, like while you're explaining this, is like coach's responsibility versus like student responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. Like as far as how much is your coach responsible in your progression, your improvement, versus how much are you responsible? Like, obviously you're there to guide them, and like, is there? Now we have a ton of students in the gym, and like on your end, like, what do you do to like help guide your students? Like, if somebody, you have a lot of white belts, they come in, they're kind of trying to find themselves, find their game. What do you think is something that you maybe work on to make your coaching more effective for those people that are still trying to find their path?
Sure. Well, first off, here's my sort of thinking on coaching. In general, most of the time, I'm trying to give people the core, the fundamentals of a position. Even if we're talking about advanced techniques in positions, the fundamentals. I'm not trying to get into every little nook and cranny of everything. Sometimes we will, but most of the time it's going to be very focused on giving the sort of core competency of a position or a technique. And the reason being is once you get that in place, then you can go off and do whatever you want to do, right? Because again, a lot of times when we watch people that are super creative and have all these cool parts of their game, we misjudge those people thinking that they have something that we don't. Because a lot of times in society, we think of the creative people have something that we don't.
Yeah.
Really what we see as creativity most of the time is simply a rock solid foundation in the fundamentals. Because when you look at, like, they've done studies on this too, but when you see creative people, typically they have such a just rock solid foundation of the basics that then the basics then don't even take up brain power, like they're on like autopilot. That then allows them to sort of ascend to a higher level of thinking, right? You look at guys like, say, for instance, a Roy Jones Jr. when he was boxing back in the day. That guy did crazy stuff, but he had a really strong fundamental core competency. You looked at, like, say, like, just because they fought recently, Mike Tyson when he was in his prime, right? He did a lot of crazy stuff that was just, he did some really interesting stuff. If you're a student of boxing, you'll know this. But when he did these things, again, he was a student of boxing. That dude used to watch tape endlessly. He was a student of boxing. He wasn't just some guy that was a brawler. He was a very he was a very studious boxer. And again, he had a core understanding of the fundamentals. And so when you're thinking about that, my job as a coach is to give people those tools as quickly as possible to give them the 80% that they need. Right, that 80% of the guts that they're going to need for jiu-jitsu, and then I'll let them go and find the 20% on their own, right? Like, for instance, one of our guys in the gym, Pabon. Pabon, he's been with us for years. He does a lot of stuff I don't do because he's gone off in his own little his own path. Patrick Bliss, one of our purple belts. he's got a leg lock game that, again, I maybe helped in some way, gave some basics, but he's gone down a different path and he's better at leg locks than I am, right? Because that's what the path he went down, But again, I can give them the core, I can give them the fundamentals, and then this way, then they can find their own. And so that's kind of what I'm focused on. Even when we're talking about more, quote, advanced positions, that's my focus on it, because if I do that, then I can allow them to be creative on their own and they can find their own paths. But if I give them the basics of everything, then they can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think it's that springboard mentality for me. It's like you're giving them a springboard, a solid foundation. They're able to kind of jump into all these, because everything kind of starts to make sense. Like all of these different little, different pathways start to make sense because they're all come from the same, pretty much the same positions, same core positions. So you understand the positions, you understand grips, you're understanding, your body position, your body placement. You're getting those things, and like so as far as like the student responsibility, I think as being a student, you have to come with the right questions. Like you've had someone's like, how do I get better? People ask you, how do I get better? Something like that. If I have a question on YouTube or something, somebody will ask me, well, how do I make this? And they don't give me any specifics on their background. It's like, I got to have specifics. So I think like when you're a student and you are trying to get guidance from your coach, specific guidance, you have to tell them what you're working towards. You can't just say, well, how do I get better at jiu-jitsu? I mean, where are you struggling? Where are you good? Or where are you comfortable now? And where do you want to get to? So I think having specifics, that's key. Sure.
Well, you need to be constantly assessing your game, right? Like, so again, getting to that, if you say, how do I get better? Well, what do you want to get better at? I don't know. Well, you haven't really thought very much about it. You haven't reflected very much on your game, have you? Like one of the things that, I always knew was like, I knew where I was, I didn't always address it, but I knew like the areas that I was very bad at. I knew the areas that I was good at and that kind of thing. And so, I mean, this is something I do as a person. I'm always kind of like looking at myself, both as a person and on the mat, sort of assessing where I'm at personally, and on the game training and everything else. Like, what are my weaknesses? What are the things I would want to change about things going on right now? I mean, I think it's something where you have to somewhat, if you're just as much as you're studying everything else you're taking in, like all the instructionals and everything else, you should probably be mindful of your own self. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you react? How do you react mentally? What kind of positions give you the most trouble? Where do you feel like you're just done from? All sorts of things that you can do just focusing on your own self. I think that's a useful lesson from jiu-jitsu, both for on and off the mat. Because to me as a person, like, you should always be sort of addressing yourself. Because like, I was talking to one of the guys this morning when I was lifting weights, and it was like, it's crazy. We live in a time, and it's always been this way, right? But everybody thinks they're right. Everybody speaks from a place of I'm right. I will talk about ideas, even on the channel. I talk about ideas. I'm not right, and I'm not attached to these ideas unconditionally. Like, these are all conditional. These are ideas that I think are useful for me right now, but they could change later on. But I think it's useful to have some, and it's always useful to understand that you're not necessarily right about everything. So this way you can listen to new stuff that comes in, because you might have some good ideas that come in. But I think that a lot of people don't ever question themselves. Like, why do you even think this? Like, why do you think this idea? Why do you do this thing, right? And so, having a self-questioning nature is important off the mats just as much as it is on the mats, right? Because then if you say, well, I believe this, I think I'm right. Why? Why do you think you're right about that? Because again, if you're right all the time, and this is something to think about, if you think you're right all the time, like, unless you're like a billionaire who's got the perfect life and everything else, you're probably wrong sometimes, right? So maybe just be okay with being wrong and just being understanding of that. This way, when better information comes up, you haven't like drawn such a mental line in the sand for yourself that you can't make the jump over from one side to the other. So I think it's important to have a self-questioning nature on and off the mats.
So how do you recommend that people assess their game?
Just be mindful.
Well, just in general.
So think about it this way.
Specifics. Are you talking like, hey, I'm going to record myself. I'm going to see how much success
you don't have to do any. You can record yourself if you want to. It's going to be a lot of work setting up that damn tripod and stuff like that. I mean, you can if you want to. You can, like I said, do if you want to. Here's something you can do. Really simply, start with, where do you get like the most anxiety from? Like when you roll with that big 260-pound guy that wrestled and he gets you in side control and you're like, I'm cooked. Does that bother you, right? That tells you that's a place you could go grow from, you know what I mean? Or with me, I remember I used to get like a lot of anxiety rolling with one of my coaches back in the day who had a killer triangle choke. So I used to force myself to roll with him. It was like taking like, I remember I was a kid and we had to like take like yucky medicine, you know, it was like that. It was like I had to go take my yucky triangle medicine because I knew like, you know, for the next, you know, 6 minutes, I was going to spend the bulk of my time with my head stuck in a man's crotch.
It's fun.
You know, I mean, it is what it is, right? But again, you can start with that. That's one, right?
Yeah.
You can also think about, okay, what am I good with, right? Here's another thing. What am I good with? Like, where do you feel like when you get excited, like as far as if you're rolling, where are you trying to get to? If you get a move, where do you feel like you have some competency with where you're like, I think I can finish this, right? There's an idea right there. Like, so, oh, well, you know, I feel like, just like me, I feel really good with the Kimura. Cool. Right. I feel good about, like, in me personally, I feel good about taking the back. That's one of my areas I look for. You know, everybody's got their own different spots. So you can look at your dark spots and you can look at your bright spots, you know, and then you can even look at the mental stuff. Are there times where you mentally give up? You know, everybody's done it before, right? You get in the middle of a roll and all of a sudden you're pushing and the guy's passing your guard or the girl's passing your guard and you're pushing. And then all of a sudden you get this mental, and then you just quit, you know, or sometimes you get frustrated. You know, we've all gotten frustrated before on the mats where you get kind of, you lose your head for a second, right? Those are places to grow. You know, I remember I was a blue belt, or not a blue belt, but a white belt, and I was rolling with a guy named Dan. And I remember this is when I was trying to learn how to play guard, and Dan would pass my guard and I would push a little bit. And I remember I'd push a little bit, try to frame a little bit. And I remember I would get frustrated and I would just quit. It was like on my shoulders. It was like one of those old like Looney Tunes cartoons where I had like the devil on one side and the angel on one side. You know, devil's like saying, "Hey, just give up. Your arms are tired. Just let him pass your guard. He can submit you, and you guys can restart." And, you know, and the better side of me is like, "No, keep fighting." And I realized when I was walking off the mat one time, and I got so mad at myself. I was like, "I'm being a bitch." Like, that's what I thought about myself. I was like, I'm bitching out. I'm giving up.
Yeah.
So I was like, not. And so I remember like thinking about, okay, I remember like when I was driving home, thinking about, all right, I'm not going to give up tomorrow. And I remember coming back and I rolled with Dan and I was ready. I was like, I know I'm going to try to give up. I'm not giving up today. I'm going to fight through it. And I remember having that battle where, you know, he's coming across and I felt it, wanted to give up. And I'm like, no, we're going to fight through this. So even being mindful of that, right? But like, you know, just sometimes like, you know, for me, one of the most valuable times for that kind of stuff is after training's over. Like when you leave and you drive home or you go home, walk home, whatever you do, take that time and like, don't, you know, just turn some music on or something and just think about how everything went. Debrief yourself. I remember one of the most valuable things probably for me was, it seemed like a negative at the time, but I've always had a drive. I remember I used to drive 45 minutes to an hour one way. And I remember when I used to have a roommate that lived with me, and we would always leave. When we were training, we were talking about this the other day. When we were training, we would drive to the gym as white belts, and we wouldn't say a word as a white belt. We would just be driving, listening to hard music, getting ready, right? Like getting nervous and getting anxious and getting there. And then when we would leave, then we would like how'd you do tonight? And we would talk about it. And then once we were not driving together every single day, when I would leave the gym by myself, I would just like play some music and I would just think about, what did I do today? How did it all go? And then I would just think about little things that maybe I think I did good or that I did bad. What could I do tomorrow? And give myself little goals. I would just think about it. You know, I just spent like, again, it's one of those things where, you know, I got really into it. So I wanted to progress and just sort of debriefing myself with it and thinking about where I could improve. And so again, it doesn't have to be an overly complicated process. If you just take a step back and just look at it, you'll have all kinds of stuff to work on. You know, you'll say like, well, you know, I'm not very good from this position, or I don't even know anything from this position, right? I'm going to go learn this a little bit, you know, or, you know, I'm really good at this position. I'd like to work more here. You know, I think I could do something with this particular position or this technique. I'll go there. Or it can, like I said, it can be the mental stuff where you're like, you know, mentally, I feel like I'm just doing X or Y or whatever. You know, next time I'm going to do this, I'm going to try to do this instead. You know, there's all kinds of ways you can do it. You know what I mean? But I think just being just present. You know, this is sometimes this is like the power of like, you know, sometimes of like what they talk about in meditation, being the witness, stepping back and witnessing what's going on. You know, because when you're in it, you're in it. But finding some time to where you take a step back and look at it and go, okay, what is going on? Right? That's an important thing for 2020, right? because I mean, it's jokingly, right? I was like, hindsight's 2020, and 2020 is a hell of a year for perspective, right?
Sure it is.
But you have to take a step back, because, like, for instance, if you were to spend all that time in the eye of the storm, watching all the negative news and both sides of the fence yelling at each other and getting you scared, because it's a machine to create fear, because fear gets people to do stuff, right? And negative stuff, right? So they're creating this thing going on, and then you're stuck in it. And if you allow yourself to be roped into it, you can get pulled every which way.
Yeah.
But if you decide, you know what, I'm going to turn all this stuff off, let me take a step back and just look at it. Then you kind of get some perspective. And you can do the same thing with your training. In the middle of it, it's all crazy, this and that, whatever. But then if you take a step back and just kind of look at it, just go, huh. Okay, like you can get some useful information from that.
Yeah, I do it a lot on the drive. That drive is on the drive there. I kind of think about goals. Like someone's more quiet, and like when me and Zach were going, like he's one of my neighbors, younger kid, very new to jiu-jitsu, and it's like he'll ask a lot of questions and stuff. And then we kind of debrief after. We would debrief.
Yeah.
We would like, hey, so I did this thing, and I enjoy sharing some of my knowledge with them. But the other thing is like. You talked about the anxiety part. Like, what gives you anxiety? And I was like, oh man, like I know that when I'm, Jeff is me and him we've trained together a lot, and he was just like a couple things. He has better takedowns than me, so I'd force myself, stand, no pulling guard, force myself to do that.
And he's intense,
and I needed that. And then like we'd get on the ground, and it would always be like. If he'd pass my guard, couple times he'd pass my guard, and I'd be in either side control or north-south bottom the whole time. And like it would piss me off a little bit, but I would also be like, all right, so today I'm fighting like hell not get my guard passed.
Yeah.
And after you get that piece, then you're like, now I'm going to attack. Now I'm going to get in this position. I'm not just going to defend. I'm just going to attack, and I'll put, and so you start kind of going through this stuff in your head. It's like you get one thing, you get a little confidence, and you keep going at it. So for me, I would get like those heavy pressure, kind of wrestler type, heavy pressure, and that would give me anxiety, because I was like, shit, I don't want to be stuck.
Because it's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have my neck just cranked on like for literally. I think fortunately and unfortunately, I can sit there in some chokes for a while, which I don't like to do because my neck usually hurts afterwards, but. But it's really made me better. And then Nick and I were rolling today, and he's like, dude, your guard was just really tough today. And I was like, I think it's from me forcing myself in that fire with Jeff every freaking morning. And it was just, and I think it's bettered that part of my game. So I've kind of been going on some parts of my game where I've had some holes, some glaring holes. So, but that's where training partners come in as well. Like that's something I was going to talk to you about, like choosing your training partners, when you're developing versus, when you're trying to fine tune, when you're trying to kind of build your A game. Like, I think being selective with those type of things can be very important as well.
Can be.
Well, I think in many ways, I was thinking about Rich. So Rich was a black belt at the gym. I was thinking about him, and a lot of my game is similar to his. And I started training with him like when I was a white belt. So I've modeled some of my stuff, and I would always like train with him, and I would also kind of use his, I would like, hey, how'd you do that? Or what do I do here? So I think that having your train, not just your coach, have upper belts or people that you're kind of coming up with, they're very important in your progression as well. So like that takes also, and that's due to the coach as well, having guys that are and girls at the gym that are really tough, So
and it's also if the coach allows them to take on that role, like
sure.
Because again, like I've had people come into gyms or come into the gym where like they couldn't really, like they weren't allowed to teach, whereas to me it's like that sounds idiotic. Like if I have like I said, a purple belt who can give some knowledge about something that he does better than I do, I want him to do that. Right, I want him to share that, even if it's just like in passing or whatever. I want him to share that, and like most things in life, you are the company you keep. So you kind of stuff rubs off on you, So just like Jeff rolling it more intense with you made you more intense, it just rubs off on you. And just like with Rich, your triangles and things like that, some of the things you developed from him, you were seeing them and using them, or he was using them against you, and you just kind of learn them through osmosis or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you just kind of absorb them.
Well, you ask questions too, and I think that really one thing that you do as a coach, when we would drill, you would kind of let us play. That's one thing you did. Like, all right, here's the move, and then you'd be like, all right, if you have some little variations, you like try those out.
Especially with the higher belts, yeah.
Yeah, you would do that with the higher belts, and like
because I like to play. Like when I go to classes and stuff like that, I'll do the move, but I also like saying, well, what happens if I do this? And what happens if I do? I just want to play a little bit and see. I want to tinker with the position a little bit.
Yeah, and that's like that self-discovery piece, that component of like, hey, let's play around, let's figure. So that's one thing you did. I think as a coach, it was helpful to me because then you have your training partner, they might show you this little tweak, and that clicks. That really makes a ton of sense. So I think in your development, you've got to find those training partners that I think that that you can kind of work certain moves on, and also that really push you and make you struggle, like you did with I think it was Kyle or
Kyle.
Yeah,
and this is partly because I don't want a gym full of automatons. I don't want little robots. I want to have a gym full of very wide variety of games where people are able to, because again, everybody's going to have a different anatomy, different attributes, different natural tendencies. I want everybody to be able to discover their own style and their own variations. Because I've gone to gyms where they had very strict curriculums where they only learn this, that, whatever, and it's like I've likened it to playing the Kung Fu game on Nintendo. Did you ever play that one?
Yeah.
Remember how you'd have like a line of like 20 bad guys coming at you, and you would just duck and swipe the kick. Like you didn't have to you just do the one move because you fought one, you fought the rest of them. Yeah. And it was like that. I've been to these gyms where it's like they have a strict curriculum where they just learn this, that, whatever. And you're like, I've rolled with one person, I've rolled with the rest of them. Where like you could see that the creativity, like where they probably would have plenty of it, has been like sort of staunched by not allowing them to do things. As far as like training partners, think of it this way. Think of different people as like for instance, let's say you go into the gym, you're getting ready to do some weights, right? You're gonna go lift some weights and get your pump on, or get your strength training on, or whatever the heck you're doing. Well, if you go in there, you will use different weights for different things, right? So let's say if you use some really, really heavy weight and you're going for like 1 to 3 reps, just really trying to get that power, elicit that power response. Move up to like 5 reps. Now we're getting more into strength training. Get up to 12 reps. Now we're getting the weight's dropping considerably. We're getting more into hypertrophy. We start getting above that, and you start getting into a little bit of hypertrophy, and then you start getting into just the cardio, right? Each one of those weights and each one of those exercises has a response that it can give to you. Same thing. You got to think of training like that where, all right, if I train with people that are very low under my level, I have the potential to basically use them as an active drilling partner. So let's say that just for the sake of argument, to make it a nice even sort of thing, let's say you're kind of middle of the pack at your gym. Maybe you're a purple belt, or maybe if your gym doesn't do belts, you're just middle of the pack, okay? So the people that are under you, the more closer to the beginners, those are the perfect people to try new stuff out. You got a new move you're trying to work out, those are your people to try it on. And because you're better than them overall, you can limit the options that they have, and you can sort of force the positions you need to have happen, and you can try things out on them, and you can use it as like an active drilling partner, right? Like where you're doing passive drilling with a movement, now you're doing it actively. Now you're like, this person has whatever options they want to do, they're fully resisting, but you can kind of control the situation. And because you know that you can get out of anything that they throw at you, it allows a lot more freedom to play. People at your same skill level, that's a different animal. That's tougher. Because that means that then you're only probably going to be able to hit any move that you've got some fairly decent level of skill with, right? And then above you, when you go against people with above you, really it's like you just do what you can, and that's where those are the kind of people where you absorb things that you just don't even know what's happening, right? And here's another thing for people when you're training. One of the things that people don't understand, even if maybe they do, but maybe sometimes it's frustrating because we get impatient, is you're learning all the time, whether you think you are or not. There was a cool study that they did where they took people that had amnesia, so they had like no short-term memory. And then they took people that had amnesia or had no amnesia. They did have short-term memory, right? They normal memory, no problems. Yeah. And they had these groups learn how to play a video game, same video game. And what they found is that both groups learned to play the video game at the same rate. So the people that had amnesia didn't even recall playing the damn game, but their bodies are remembering how to do it. So like, because it's a bodily kinesthetic thing. So their bodies, like hand-eye coordination, all this stuff's happening with the video game. They're learning how to play it, even though they don't remember playing it.
Yeah.
And then the other side's the same rate. So you can think about that. That's an interesting study where, again, how it could apply is like a lot of times you may not feel like you're getting better. You may not even recall being hit with the same technique over and over and over again, but your body starts to absorb this stuff.
Right.
And again, what happens eventually is you get to that situation where your body is moving in front of your mind, right? That's like, by the way, for people listening, like this is when you got it. Like, you've got a move down, or you're getting really good when your body is operating faster than your mind can keep up. Like, for instance, recently at the Nogi Pans, I had a really slick back take. I've been working on that back take for a couple of years. I've been working on that particular variations of that same technique for a couple of years. It's been like, I really like it, and it works really well with my game. And so with that, when I hit that move, I did not think about it. I noticed it, but the noticing was more of, imagine right now if you're listening to this podcast, if you're just listening and you're hearing the words that I'm speaking, but you're not necessarily making a judgment on it or really thinking about what the words mean. You're just hearing it, and by hearing me talk, you understand what the words mean just because you're observing the sounds. Same thing, right? You're just there. You're not necessarily thinking too hard about it. You just notice. The same thing. I was just in the moment, and then I just noticed it, and I went with it. And I remember I realized that I had hit that back take after I already had a choke caught. I already had the arm under the neck, and my mind had caught up and go, oh sweet, I just did that move. I was thinking that. So again, it's one of those things where that's when you got it. And so again, going back to it, along with the passive drilling, which is, I know there's people online that knock it and say that just drilling your moves is not useful. I can just tell you, go look at the way that a lot of high level athletes and other sports train. They do a lot of it, right, in their own fashion, right? It's like, again, these guys are paid millions, probably know something, right?
Sure.
And then along with your passive drilling, you sort of divide. Once you get to a certain level, for the newer people, you're just trying to do what you can. But once you start to get some skill under you, you start having these groups of people where I can beat this person. This person's tough. This person's going to smash me. And again, have different games for different people, right? So, okay, on this person, I'm going to try this. On this person, I'm going to try this. On this person, I'm going to try this. Now, again, maybe that requires a little bit more thought from you than just going into the gym and just being like, hey, coach, give me something. It requires a little bit more thought and you to be a little bit more accountable for yourself. But I mean, that's a really useful thing. And that's been for me, as a coach who doesn't always have, I have good training partners now. I have no problem. I have great training partners now. We built them, right? We built the training partners that I needed, got them. But when 2009, 2010, it was like a bunch of blue belts. Actually, mostly white belts, handful of blue belts, a purple belt. That's what I had. Maybe a black belt from time to time, but most of the time it was just us and training. And so that's what I had to deal with. And I was going into black belt competitions in 2012 and everything else, and I was doing well. Part of that was because I had to take a much more active approach to my training. So I couldn't just go in there and say, give me, coach, because I'm the coach now, right? So what I had to do is go into the gym. All right, today my goal is I'm going to try to hit arm bars all day long. Hit arm bars, or whenever it gets down to 1 minute on the clock, I'm going to start moving and I'm not going to stop. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm probably going to scramble and get myself into really bad positions, but I want to increase my ability to move fast. And so I'm just going to start moving, and so I'd give myself little goals when I would come into the gym and be very focused on something deliberately. Yeah. And so that was useful to me. And that's something that you can do. You don't have to be a coach to do that. You can just be very deliberate. I'm going to work on X or Y, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
Yeah. I hate making mistakes. It's one of the things, I'm always so hard on myself, but I know that whenever I make a mistake, I learn from it so much more. If I go to a tournament and I get hit with something, or even rolling, training with whoever, they hit me with something, I know that I'm going to learn from that so much more because it cuts a little deeper, it affects me more. And I think, because nobody likes to, like you said, who wants to be terrible or who wants to be mediocre at jiu-jitsu? Nobody wants to be mediocre.
Nobody.
And so it affects you, and for me personally, I learn from it because I start going down the rabbit hole. I'm like, okay, I start looking at all angles. How did it get set up? What happened? How did this transpire, take place, and that's where and it also gives me direction to my game. Like I know that sometimes
making mistakes.
Yeah, it gives me like, oh well, this is a flaw here.
Yeah.
This is a hole. You need to fix this hole.
Well, this is something where I think it was one of Robert Bly's lectures I was listening to. If you guys follow me long enough, he was the guy that wrote Iron John, and I think it was him. But he was talking about learning. Learning is a painful process.
Yes.
Right. It's always been painful. It's why like institutions for learning were closed off. Right, like you think about it, it's a closed thing. When you get into an institution for learning, it's kind of a closed thing, like because it's a painful process, and it's also why you think about the things that is we were just talking about discovering and everything else. You discover stuff most of the time when you mess up, right, and that's when you learn it, right? When you mess up and then it works. Boom, man, that's something that feels good. Oh my gosh, that's like dude. That's probably one of the best feelings in the world. Like no matter what it is, I don't care if it's jiu-jitsu or not jiu-jitsu. When you do something and it does not work, and then you make adjustments and you do it and it works, that is like satisfying.
It is. It's exactly what I was thinking.
Oh, it feels good, right? It's like it's like whatever like makes you like satisfying. Like my girlfriend, she watches all those damn pimple popper videos, right?
Oh, yeah.
And she just finds it so satisfying to watch them pop. Like it grosses me out.
That's pretty rough.
But for me, it's like that kind of thing where I figure something out and I make it work. Oh man, it's so satisfying.
Yeah.
Like I remember one time, like in the business, this was a couple of years ago. We ran a little special, and it was just crickets, didn't work at all, So I tweaked a couple things and then sent the emails out to the people, and then made the tweaks. Oh, dude, it was like just rolling in. People were like, oh, God, we got to come in and train with you guys and whatever. So it's like, oh, it worked. So I was so sad. I was so happy about that. I was doing like happy dances.
Yeah.
Because again, like you took some information, tried it out, didn't work, made adjustments, fixed it. That's fun. Right, but you got to be willing to go through the pain.
Yeah.
There was there was a quote or there was a story. I've been listening to audiobook Rumi.
Yeah.
So Rumi was he's a Persian. Was a Persian poet. I know that there's somewhat of a controversy over the translation of it, but nonetheless I find it useful. But there was a story in it, whether it's authentic to him or not, whatever. It's a useful story. It was about a guy who was going to get a tattoo of, I think it was a tattoo of a lion, right? So he sits down and he's like, all right, he's like, so I want this big tattoo of this lion. Okay, cool. And so the guy he puts the needle up to his skin and he starts going to it, and the guy goes, ow. He's like, where are you at? He's like, I'm doing the tail. Oh, well, maybe we leave the tail off. So then he goes, okay. And he starts drawing. He's like, ow. He goes, well, what? He goes like, what part of the lion are you doing right now? The nose. Well, I'm a little tender where the nose is. Let's just do no nose. And it goes on like this till the guy like has nothing left. And so the tattoo artist goes, I have never drawn a lion without a nose, a tail, a leg, whatever. And the idea was in the thing, it was everybody wants the tattoo of the lion, but they don't want to endure the pain that it takes to get it.
Yeah.
And everybody wants the thing, whatever that thing is, but they don't want to always have to go through the pain to get it. And even like for me, one of the hardest things for me early on, because I was bad about making mistakes and not wanting to learn from them. Like for instance, when I used to watch matches back in the day, I never liked watching my losses. I used to hate it. Like it would make me uncomfortable watching losses. So I would skip through them. And I made the same damn mistakes over and over and over again for like a couple of years until I started watching them and I like dissecting them and learning from them, and granted it was a little painful to watch me get smashed or whatever, but I can tell you that it was some of my best performances are directly because of learning from those mistakes. 100%.
Yeah.
The
most it's emotionally painful because jiu-jitsu means something to us, so like it's you feel those. To me, when I watch some of my matches again, it's like I feel the emotion of competing. You
relive it,
and then you feel the loss a little bit.
Yeah,
it's not as bad. Obviously, it's already happened.
Yeah, of course,
the outcome, but like you just feel that. Oh God, it's like, and I'll find myself and I'll be like, damn it, Eugene, do this. Like I was telling myself, I'm telling myself to do shit. I know obviously I can't, but so I noticed that, and it's just like. So you relive that and you feel your heart rate kind of start jumping up a little bit, and but it's because we value it so much.
It is. What's interesting though, this is something that's been really neat over the last, and I don't know exactly why, but the last several years, when I compete, I want to win badly. and I compete to win. And if
Yes.
anybody watches me, you'll notice that I'm ultra aggressive. Like, I'm there to win. I'm not there to play around, right? But I'm not. I've talked about this before. I'm not needy for the win.
Right.
I'm not needy for it. Like, if I don't win, ain't no big deal to me. You know, like I lost recently at the Nogi Pans in the second round. I was like, okay, whatever happens. Okay, no big deal. You know, I wasn't mad, wasn't upset. It is what it is. You know, and I watched that match again, found a few things that I know I can work on.
Yeah.
I was like watching it. I was like, okay, there we go. I can do that. And I made some notes for myself and what I could have done differently. And there was literally no pain associated with it. It was more of like just thinking about it, you know. And I think that it's a good place to be from, you know, where you're like, look, it's all right, you know, whatever. But maybe it was also because I'd already won a medal. I'd already won my division that day. So, you know, maybe if I had lost that way in the first round and that would have been it for my tournament experience, maybe my view would have been different. But because I had won a division already that day, I was already like had a first place, and I was going in there and, you know, into the open, and I was like, whatever, you know,
having some more fun. Basically.
Yeah, you know, so it's like you never know. It's like those things kind of play into it. So I'm sure I probably would have been a little bit more pissed off if I at myself if I had lost first round or whatever. But at the same time, you know, I don't get too upset about it like I used to.
Yeah, I think sometimes it depends on how you lose. You didn't lose because the guy was necessarily that much better than you. It was kind of like that's played the rules a little bit.
But bro, and I hate when people say that. That's how this shit works.
It is
like
it is,
you know, because you can't make that. I don't like, because here's the thing. I don't like to put that asterisk on it because someone got their hand raised, someone didn't, and so I understand the rules.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about high level black belts, you make one mistake, bro.
Yeah.
And again, someone listening, I'm not, ultra high level black belt. I'm good. Right? Like, I'm not JT Torres good. I'm not Gordon Ryan good, but I'm good. Right?
Yeah.
I say that because, like, it's so funny. I get some trolls sometimes, and they're like, someone was like, "Man, Chewy's so good," or something about that, and it's like, "Yeah, just imagine if he was Gordon Ryan." I'm like, and I'm like, I wish I could roll with that person. I'm like, let me see what you got. It's like, oh, like, it's like, it's so funny. Yeah. So, I'm not Gordon Ryan good, but I'm good. Going against those guys, you make one mistake, bro.
Right.
That's all it is. And so again, if you know how to play the rules, that's what's going to happen, bro. It's a competition. So that's part of it. And, I tend to not play the rules the smartest all the time because I'm very aggressive and I try to whatever, but you know what? It's all right. And that's the way it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing, like, kind of my point was, like, when in that situation, like, if you were like, man, you get beat by 20 points and then submitted, that's a different feeling. You're like, I lost by 2, whatever, better luck next time. It's different. What I'm saying is different than when someone comes in and, like, just demolishes, it's more, I think it's more tough of a loss.
You know what? I'll say it this way. You know why I think this is really what it really comes down to is when I compete these days, I give it everything. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no hindrance. So when I was younger, I was hindered because of the fear of a loss, neediness for the win. So when I competed, I really never felt like for a long time that I was actually being myself. I was being the best that I could be. I didn't feel like the best Chewy showed up to the mat. I was like, man, I'm much better in the gym. And I felt like I showed up and I was okay in competition. Now it's the opposite. I feel like I'm much better in competition than I am in the gym because I'm like 100% going. Mm-hmm. And part of it is that I'm not hindered by any sort of thoughts of worry or whatever. I'm excited to be there and I'm going to go for it. And if I was to lose 20 to zip and get some dude who, like, did whatever, as long as he was respectful, I don't like to. I don't like when you see people like that are disrespectful. It tarnishes to me the competitive element to it, the sportsman element. But as long as they're cool and stuff like that, I mean, if I lose 20 to zip or with a choke or whatever, if I win 100% and I didn't have anything left, I'd be like, I had nothing for the dude. That was just how it's going to happen, Even like when I went against Tim Spriggs at ADCC, like, I remember he submitted me, and again, like, I wasn't upset with the loss. Because he beat me fair and square. It was a beautiful guillotine. I was more upset with myself because I started thinking. I was like, the whole day I hadn't thought, and then I got into the match with him, and I thought, had the match happened exactly the same, but I hadn't thought, yeah, whatever, just what happens, Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's the big one. Because to me, competition it's like anything else, right? We're typically our own worst critic, our biggest enemies ourselves, right? I mean, to me, it's like competition is one part you up against another human being, but more importantly to me, it's about a conquering of self, right? Because you go in, you're nervous, you have all these weird feelings going on about it. Even with people going into the gym, like I was talking to a white belt just the other day, and he was talking about how he's kind of nervous. He's like, man, every time I get here, I got to use the bathroom. And I was like, yeah, you nervous? He's like, well, I don't feel like I'm nervous, but I'm kind of anxious or excited. I was like, yep, I used to do it all the time too. It's like, that's a good thing. So even just you being there in the gym, you won. Because you got past that, because most people can't get over that part. Like a lot of people like want to go train, but then they don't because they're like, well, I don't know, it's unknown, right?
Yeah.
And so when you deal with those feelings, you're doing all these a myriad of different feelings. Just that in itself is you're conquering self. And so I think that's a useful thing, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, where along with the technical stuff, being in tune with like what's going on in your head when you're rolling. You getting frustrated? You getting angry? Were you thinking about going for that submission, but you pulled back because you were nervous about getting smashed afterwards? So you really only went 50%. You didn't go 100%. Like again, those things are things to be mindful of, and those are like important tools because those things translate to when you get off the mat. Because if you get in tune with yourself of how you're acting in a stressful environment, well then, I've shared this story before. Like there was years ago where I had a guy who was being very rude to me at my gym and was yelling at me, being in my face. It was a guy who his daughter had come in and signed up or something like that. We cut her a discount. I mean, there was no reason to yell, but he felt like we had done something wrong. And I mean, there's like a little thing. I was like, we can just cancel the account. It's no big deal. He's like yelling and screaming, whatever else. And I remember like getting this anger. I was like, how rude of you to come in and yell. I'm trying to be nice to you and you're going to yell? And then so I was like, I could feel the anger coming up because like when I get angry, it comes up through my chest, up and through my neck. And I just want to like, I wanted to like grab the guy by his like back of his head and just like bang off the table. You know what I mean? Like just like, stop it. Stop being so rude. But then I was like, caught myself. I'm like, deep breath. I got this. Deep breath in the stomach. And then I was sitting there, I stared at him in his eyes and just smiled, just waited. And he's just going, like loses steam. And he looks at me, he's like, well, are you going to say something? I was like, well, I'll be happy to talk to you, but you're not going to yell at me, and I'm not going to yell at you. And just that calmness, he's like, oh, that's not what he was expecting. And then it, completely changed the conversation. Yeah. And so, but I know 100% that my ability to be cognizant of that going on is 100% from training. Because there's been times when I was younger in jiu-jitsu, I'd like get angry, I'd get frustrated, and it would get me. I'd get super angry or something like that. So yeah,
that's interesting. The competition thing, I feel like I'm gun shy in competition. I feel like I'm more. I don't know. For me, like I think I put more pressure. Obviously, it's more pressure. It's there's more unknown, but I feel like I sometimes like freak myself out, and I'm almost like gun shy. I don't go for it. I don't know. I want to do well. I think part of it is like it's an environment that's kind of there's a lot of unknown. You don't know who you're going against. You don't know. Sometimes you don't know when you're going. You don't know, like you just don't know. It's not your gym. It's not like.
But once you're on the mat, but once you're actually on the mat rolling with someone, do you feel like you're gun shy?
Yes.
Now, why do you feel like you're gun shy during the match? Because at that point, there are no more. The unknown. The match is unknown. But as far as like the matches, what time is concerned, all that stuff's been decided. We're there doing it right now.
I don't know. I think that for me personally, what makes me better in that situation is reps. Is to be, if I competed more frequently, I would feel a lot more confident. I would feel a lot more. I'd feel a lot more at ease. I would just be like, oh, just another tournament. Just another tournament. So that kind of thing. Like, when I competed back to back, like one time back to back weekends, I felt good. I was like, oh, I've already been through this just last week. I've already been through the jitters. So it's kind of, it's a big deal because sometimes but it's not spending. Well, I think like the build up, like you're spending a lot of weeks. But effort, time.
That's the problem then.
Yeah.
This is where again this is where the freedom came from. Like just being aware. It's like this doesn't matter. It matters to me, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't. And there's this thing where basically what happens is if I go in and I'm too worried about, I spent the time for this, I spent the money for this. If I lose, then I'm going to go home empty-handed and I don't get the medal and blah, blah. You worry about all this gunk, right? And then you lose sight of what you actually have to do. I've got to roll. And it's in those moments when you're just rolling, that's what you got to be focused on. So you got to throw caution in, because for me, and I just say this, when I got the freedom from that, my performance went up because I'm no longer worried. Like I'm not worried about it. I don't care that I spent this money. I don't care that it might be my only match that day. I'm just there. This is the only thing that matters. And I know that if I get too hung up on everything else around it, it's like the idea of no mind, right? Like, it was like, is it Mushin no Shin, something like that? No mind, Mushin, no mind. I think. Right. Mushin no Shin, something like that. But like mind, no mind, right? So like no mind. Like you can't be thinking about everything else. Mm-hmm. They had that scene. I remember me and one of my buddies that did jiu-jitsu. We watched it in The Last Samurai. There was that scene where he goes, no mind. Like he tells mind your opponent, mind the audience, mind this, no mind. Right. And it's those moments where you're like, just let loose. Like get out of your head. Get rid of the what ifs. If you get caught in a guillotine, so be it. If you go for the takedown, it doesn't work. Who cares? Figure it out from there. Just go. Just go and stop worrying about every little detail, because hell, that's a philosophy of your life, right? Like everybody gets like, I want to do this, but what happens? Just go. Stop. You'll figure it out. If it doesn't work out, you'll learn along the way, right? Like, and again, it has to be like that. And so that's for me. There a freedom comes from that when you're not hindered from all the what ifs and this and that, and you're just going. When you lose the buildup of it, like I remember like doing pretty well at some of the competitions over time, and those competitions, like sometimes I didn't even train hard for them. I mean, I'm always training. I'm always in shape and stuff, but like I didn't train for months, or sometimes I did train for months, but I was like, whatever, just do it.
Just hop in.
And then even the tournaments I did train for hard, like this competition leading up to it, I put 2 months of dieting in, got down to a lower weight class. And then I started training hard for about a month ago. I mean, but I didn't even think about that. That wasn't even on my mind at all. Yeah. The only thing that was on my mind was, I got this guy in front of me and I'm going to try to hit this technique on him. That's all I'm thinking about. That's it. Nothing else. So yeah. There's a freedom that comes from that.
Yeah. And even like, I just think for me, it's more the uncertainty. Like I have a hard time with mistakes. Like I'm hard on myself with mistakes. So I think like that for me is a big thing, making mistakes. Because then I kind of like, I'm one of those people that like will ruminate about it.
I know.
And I'm one of those people that's just like, it's in my head. And I can't get it out. I can't get it out until I have a chance to fix it.
Well, right. Well, remember going back to you were talking about that competition where you did too, right? You competed, lost. And then like you would not shut up about it, and you were rolling about it. Like it was on your mind every day you were training. And then you like found the closest, most like the soonest tournament you could. Yeah. Boom, did another one and did great in that one. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, got it out of my system.
I had to, man.
Yeah.
I had to. I couldn't rest. Like my brain would not rest.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't. I just felt I had this just taste in my mouth. I was like, this is so. And because it was such a, at our gym, and it was just like in front of everyone, it was always just kind of tough.
Yeah, but again, that's everybody else. Who cares? Just is what it is.
Yeah, man. But
But there has to be freedom from it. Like,
there has to,
because you can't be worried about that stuff, because that stuff takes you away from the moment. And the moment's the only thing that really matters in your situation.
As I've gotten older, I kind of don't give a shit about what other people think. And I used to. And some of the stuff, like say you're putting a video out, and somebody, like I'll put like a exercise, and somebody will send me a message like, oh, this is this, or they'll give me all this like negative feedback.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I've made sure that I've kept myself positive. Like, I use it constructively if I can. Mm-hmm. I use that information constructively. I don't get defensive. And so I've started to not really care. Like, if you're getting that kind of attention, that means you're getting attention, period. And that's not a terrible thing.
One of my buddies, the nutrition coach that I hired, we were talking, and just talking about different stuff, and about haters and this and that, and he said that he got some advice from from a kid once, and maybe he got this from somewhere else, I don't know, but it was pretty good. He was talking to his I believe it's his son or his nephew or something, he's playing a video game, and he was asking him, he's like, man, how do you know which way to go? Right? And he said, well, as long as I keep going, if I'm going the right way, I find more bad guys. So as long as I'm finding bad guys, I'm going the right way. And it's kind of like that way with everything you do, right? The more you shine, the more miserable people that will be out there. don't get me wrong. There is constructive criticism that comes, and if you've got good constructive criticism, even me, I've had like people say, "Hey, Chewy, that music was a little too loud in that. Could you just like that?" Fair enough. That's a constructive whatever. But like, you're an idiot, you know, that kind of stuff. You can't pay attention to that stuff.
Sure, absolutely.
It's like an invalid comment. It doesn't mean anything. It's like you look at it, and when I see those, I'm like, I always have this image of this person. Because I'm thinking, who does this? Like, I don't do this. I've never jumped on someone's video of anything and like, let me just crap on this person. Who does this stuff? But
somebody that doesn't produce any content.
Well, not even content. It's someone that's just, it's absolutely miserable. Yeah, right, like miserable people project misery because the world around you is going to reflect what's going on inside of you. Yeah. Right. Like if people spend 10 minutes with me, you'll know exactly what kind of mood I'm in or how I am, or whatever, right? Because of what's going on in me. Yeah. Same thing with everybody else, right? So if you're this kind of person, you're just going to be that way. But it's like that. The more you shine, the more bad guys you run into. So the better you're doing, the more haters you're going to find. Yeah. You know, that's the way it always works. Yeah. So. Well,
yeah, your exposure, your reach is so much further. You know, and that you're going to reach more good people. You're going to reach more people that don't agree with what you're sharing.
Well, yeah, I mean, don't agree is one thing. I mean, sometimes people are they just see someone doing something that's either cool or something they would want to do, or just doing something where maybe they're not having success in the thing that they're doing, and so they just want to lash out.
That's right. That's right.
This podcast has taken a turn from all sorts of different angles.
We always do that, though. Yeah. Like it's always like, oh, we're going to talk about this topic, and then it's like, we're all the way in left field somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
We're all the way, what the hell? What are we talking about?
We somehow ended up from your coach not being a parent who's spoon feeding you to talking about creating content online and dealing with trolls.
Well, yeah, it's a progression there. Listen to the podcast.
Oh no, I know.
There's a natural, chain of events that led to this point.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
all right, guys. So hope you enjoyed that podcast. Hope you enjoyed this one. It's the ending of the podcast, so God knows how long we're going to talk. If you're a long-time listener, you know that sometimes we end up just chatting about stuff for a while. By the way, I don't know if you guys knew this. We recently got a nice spiffy podcast room, and if you would like to actually watch the videos of the podcast and you'd like to be able to see the spiffy table, I remember here's a fun experiment for you. Go back and watch. I don't know if you can find them. If you can find like the oldest podcast, Jiu-Jitsu podcast that I have on my channel, which was probably either me and you sitting on a couch somewhere or us sitting in the back of my back office back in the day, like, go back and watch.
I remember the first Jiu-Jitsu podcast we did.
Well, we did on your massage table.
On the massage table with one Blue Yeti mic between us.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
and if you go back and listen to it, it'll sound like that too.
But like we're on a toilet. We're like in a stall just talking to each other.
Oh man,
that was rough.
But if you guys go back and look at that, then we eventually upgraded, and then we had Grandma's table. I remember someone was watching the live feed. They said, "Look at these two assholes with Grandma's table," and then Eugene's like, "Shut up, man! It is my grandma's table."
It really was my grandma's table, man.
Now we got this sweet table here. Whose table? Who made this?
It's Sandusky Woodworks.
Sandusky Woodworks. So if you're in Ohio, or if you're just close by, check it out. It's super, super cool. It's such a nice table.
My buddy Brad, and he did all handmade. He made this thing.
Made it with his bare hands.
All these if you can see these grains of wood, all this stuff. Let me get this angle. These are all like separate pieces of wood he put together. It's insane.
It's super cool.
And his daughter like helps him out and stuff. So it's like his business and his like shed and his garage and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
So yeah, check it out. And then just a reminder, guys, if you want to check out the Patreon, one of the things I wanted to mention is that I know some of you guys are not able to train because of lockdown restrictions and stuff like that at the time of recording this. It's 2020, it's December, and so I know that some restrictions are there, but a lot of the gyms, weightlifting gyms, are still open. If you guys can get in the gym and lift weights, Joe and I, we put up the we made a 4-week program. We made it originally for people coming back from the COVID, back in June or whatever. Yeah. And a lot of times when people come back, one of the things that happens is when people come back to weight training, one of the worst feelings ever is you go in, you hit it hard, and then you're shot. Like your muscles are super sore, you're in pain, everything hurts. and all that stuff. And so one of the things that we did is we created a 4-week program for our members coming back to kind of get them started again, kind of a restart program. We even tested it out on my girlfriend, Jess, who is like she knows this and she listens to the podcast, so I'm not telling her anything she doesn't know that I already say to her. She's the biggest baby about being sore. like I think that we just respond to pain differently, you know. Like for me, I'm like, when I get sore, I'm like, yeah, I freaking love it. Where she gets sore, she's like, ew, my legs hurt. Ew. That's what she sounds like. Ew, Nick.
She doesn't sound like that at all, Jess.
This is my voice for her. Nick, my legs hurt, Nick. That's my voice for her. She loves that voice.
Oh boy, is that actual voice you use with her?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah,
Oh,
all the time. I'll go. That poor woman. She's
got the sweetest, nicest person.
She's
ever.
got the patience of a saint to put up with my ass.
Oh, man.
But anyway, so we tested out on her. She didn't get overly sore, and she was able to do it. It's a pretty quick workout. So each workout's about roughly probably going to be about 45 minutes total. And if you use the program, it's super simple, and it's 4 weeks. And then afterwards, you could easily begin to upgrade and add on to it, or just do a different program. And so if you guys want to check that out, along with everything else that's inside the Patreon, that is included for you guys, so you can get the access to that. Again, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And then also, we were going to say something else.
The YouTube channel.
Oh, the YouTube channel. That's right. So if you guys want to watch us, this is what happens. I get on tangents because the whole reason why I was going to talk about the podcast room and this fancy table is because if you guys want to watch us on video, you can go to the Chewjitsu podcast YouTube, which we would appreciate it if you did it, because we were trying to grow the thing, and so it'd be helpful for you if you want to help. Like if you're thinking to yourself, hey Chewy, I'm not gonna go to the Patreon. I ain't lifting weights. I'm not gonna do that. That's not what I want to do. Well, say, listen, you don't have to do that. For free, you can literally go over to YouTube and you can just click a button that says subscribe, and that helps us out. And so you can maybe do that instead. So
you can watch us.
You can watch us. You can watch us.
You can stare at this table if you want.
You can stare at this table, and you can stare at me talking. And I play with my bracelets all the time.
You do.
Yeah, because when I meditate.
Yeah, it's Does that have a certain number? Does that have a certain number?
No, this one does not. This is not a full one. So, but I do the same thing where as I meditate, I'll bring the beads through my hands so I can have something, so I can have some sort of physical focus. And so a lot of times when I'm talking, I'll bring the beads through my hands so that I'm basically bringing some awareness. It's like, have you ever noticed that you have some of your most creative thoughts when you're showering, when you're cleaning, walking? You know what I mean? Do you understand?
Yeah.
You ever notice like you go for a walk, or if you do something that's very repetitive that you've done a million times, that you'll have this you start thinking about things in a different way, right? Like even when you're driving. Like I don't know about you, I have great ideas when I'm driving, right? And so for me, it's like it's this very repetitive motion that sort of quiets my brain a little bit, and then it allows other things to float through.
Well, I think you're maybe you're expelling some physical energy, and it's allowing your brain to kind of take over.
I don't know. I know that with going back to what we were talking about again earlier about basics being automatic, when you get to these basic tasks, it allows you to then sort of think on a different level. But I don't know. It helps. So
I think so. Well,
so that's why. So if you guys ever watch the video, you'll see me playing with these beads, and it's my bracelet. That's what I'm doing. I'm just there. Sort of. It's a way to kind of bring some attention to something else. So.
All right.
So, hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Again, if you want to check out Charlotte's Web, again, if you heard the story at the beginning about my black belt who started training with us, who I gave some CBD to, he's loving it. If you guys want to try it out, do the month test. 1 month test, see what you notice, right? Go to their website, charlottesweb.com. And you can use promo code Chewjitsu and save 15% on the order. And you can try it out for a month, see what you feel, see what you think. My recommendation, if I can make one to you, is the sleep gummies, which has some melatonin included with it. Try that out for a month, or just one of the tinctures, any of the flavors that you want to try. I'm a big fan of the lemon. I like the lemon twist. Tastes like Fruity Pebbles.
What's this one we got?
The gummies, by the way, are dangerous.
Orange Blossom.
Those gummies, if they didn't have CBD, I could just eat them as candy.
I'm like, I want to eat. Every time I take them, every night I take the sleep gummies. I tell my wife, I'm like, man, I wish I could eat like 5
right. Like, I wish I could eat this whole thing just to start popping them.
Don't do that. Don't do it.
No, you don't do that.
We had a little escapade one time where we did some gummy tasting, and then it was like after training, it was like 1 o'clock. and we just tasted a bunch of gummies, and then like,
Oh my God, bro. I was so tired. Like, because we took these gummies and we tried a little bit of the all three different
relax.
flavors, and I remember I was just so exhausted. I went home and like slept for 2 hours, which usually my sleep is like 20 minutes. I'll have like a little power nap and I feel great. I went to sleep for 2 hours and I felt terrible. I sent you like an angry text.
You texted me, you're like, dude, are you like tired? Like relaxed? I was like, dude, I'm pretty relaxed. I feel really relaxed.
I was exhausted.
So, yeah,
But it works. So try it out, see if you think.
take it responsibly.
And then you can go to epicrollbjj.com and you can check out, if you're watching right now, I'm flashing his hat. You can check out some of Matt's stuff. Big fan of his products. They're good. I use them during training. I wore his hoodie down there at the Nogi Pans down in Georgia when I was competing there last week to get warmed up in. So again, if you guys want to check it out, go to their website. Promo code is Chewjitsu, 15% off in the order. And guys, if you want to be a part of the Chew Crew email list, whatever. I hate calling it a list because it's like I reply with these people. It's like when people send me messages, I reply back to them and I talk with them. Just the Chew Crew. If you want to join the Chew Crew, you go to chewjitsu.net, and I have a little thing where I give away some free ebooks. One ebook is about how to structure and how to create your own game plan. That one's a really popular one. The other one is some ideas on drilling, sort of philosophies on drilling that I implement, and there's a video included with that. And so you can check out that little section. And I think I put it together too. There's also a resource for if you're trying to train during COVID and lockdown stuff. There's some resources for all this stuff. It's all free. Sign up. Put your email list in. You will get a daily email from me, almost daily. I don't always email on the weekends, but almost daily. And some of the stuff that we talk about on the podcast sometimes makes its way on the emails first. And so you can check that out. So if you want to do that, go to chewjitsu.net. .com was taken. I'm working on getting it. It's damn squatters. So
one of these days.
So you can check it out there and jump on the Chew Crew list. And that's that. So